I'm not shy about saying that in the recording either. I've said it at plenty of college campuses. Well, let's see if this connects to the right microphone. I think it will. All right. This desktop, share. Okay, and I've got some people. Good. Let me just check and see if my microphone is correct. Usually it does automatically pick it up. Yeah, that looks okay. Good. All right. So hopefully you people can hear me. All right. So anyway, I just wanted to say, if you think about, let me interrupt you guys because they won't be able to hear me. If you think about the taxi industry, is probably the best example of an old model that got completely disrupted by Uber, that basically stole all their money and they're going broke. And I'm watching the same thing happen to colleges. We are living through, I think, a huge change in colleges. And colleges used to need a degree to succeed, and they used to control the degree, and what they taught used to be what you need on the job, and none of that is true anymore. Colleges don't adapt fast enough. The skills they teach are not the ones you need on the job. So you get industry certificates, which have nothing to do with colleges, and yet colleges keep increasing the price. Anyway, so I know at Stanford a couple of years ago, a teacher like this that tried to teach classes and got cut from the administration just quit and went to teaching MOOCs online with no college in the loop. And especially with the internet, it's not really clear what value the college adds to this process. You just have the students and a teacher, and everybody else can just be replaced by a computer program, and it'll work a lot better. But anyway, you won't get a degree. So if you already have like a 4-year degree, I don't think there's any reason to care about getting credit from this college at all. What matters is knowing something and perhaps industry certificates. Anyway, so I'm going to teach this class, and if you want credit, you might get a chance to get it this semester if the administration actually knocks loose of their logjam and adds it to the schedule. But if they don't, I will ask them to add it next semester. And if they do, then you can earn a credit this semester and sign up next semester and just collect your credit without doing any more work. I'll keep track of the grades this semester, and if you have enough for an A or a B or something, you can just sign up next semester and get it. So, and if you don't care about the credit, which is fine with me, that's fine too. But I will grade anything you send in so you can see how you're doing and compare it to others. So right now, this is a pirate class with no official presence, but it may turn into an official class if the administration actually gets moving. So I got no ad codes, there is no CORN, there is no registration. And this motivated me to do something I probably should have done before, which is to get off all city college systems. One other problem with my other classes is students on my quizzes are in the city college online quiz system, and the students who add can't get in because they're very slow and ineffective at actually adding them to the system. And I finally said, you know, I don't need any of that. There's a free online system I learned here, which I control, and I just turned on self-registration. So you can just add yourself to the quizzes and take them. You don't need a key from me or anything. So here's the book, the Shellcoder's Handbook. It's a pretty old book. It's available everywhere. If you just type it into Google, it will give you like 8 pirate PDF copies in the top 10 hits. If any of you are of dubious moral standings and would dare to violate copyright protection. But anyway, other than that, you can buy it. It's all over the place. It's quite an old book, but it is the standard in this business, and there's nothing has appeared to replace it. So we are not going to do what you might think the main point of this book is, which is tell you how to write your own shellcode. Instead, we're going to use Metasploit to make shellcode the way most people do. But we will be going through the other techniques in this book, which are very important. I just didn't think the assembly language programming to write your own shellcode was worth it at this point, especially since I don't think very many students come here that have already taken an assembly course. That would be nice, but until recently, there wasn't a good assembly course to take here, and very few students could be expected to know it. So we're going to cover a little bit of assembly in this class, but not very much. There is an assembly class over in CS, and it'd be very good to take it if you want to move into this area. The other thing I wanted to mention is the reason why I'm teaching this class is because we're getting involved in cyber competitions. We're now, the last competition we were in, we were #1 in the Western region at defense. Although this is just a preliminary competition, not the one that really counts, which happens in a week, it still is a very good standing. We beat Berkeley, we beat Stanford, we beat all the real famous places. So now this semester, the CCDC and the CPTC will not be happening, and those are the main college-oriented contests. So here's another dreadful thing about college training. College contests are wimpy. They're too easy, and industry people have a whole different level of it. So since the college ones aren't running, I put on my website a whole bunch of the normal open ones. And this cyber defense competition happens next week, and nobody new can join. And if we don't score highly, this will be the end of our season for us until next year. So this is not really going to have much to do with students this semester. It's really something students are finishing who started in previous semesters. So students this semester, there's a bunch of these CTFs like InsomniHack and Sharif and CodeGate and Hackakazi and Easy CTF. And I rated them, are they easy or hard? A few of them are easy, and those are reasonable. They're about like my homework assignments. The hard ones are really hard. Often so hard that you will struggle for 2 days and not get a single one. But you have to get used to that. And it does point out to you something that you might not believe if you're taking classes and reading books and taking tests, which is the stuff you learn in college is not even half of what the people in the real industry are doing. I've had my most advanced student who knew everything, would be on all my classes. We're doing all these independent, exciting projects. And I said, you need to get you a job. So I got him a job at Cloudflare, and they said, boy, I don't know, this guy's going to have a really steep learning curve catching up. And I'm like, dude, I don't have anybody to send you that's ahead of that guy. He did fine, but there's just a huge difference between the professionals and what they teach you in college. And we are apparently a lead in college in this field, and it's still true for us. So this will remind you, college only gets you started. Books only get you started. Real industry security work involves a lot more advanced skills that you really only learn on the job in real combat. So anyway, we'll do what of these we can. And the reason I really wanted to teach this class is that you can't really participate in CTFs without knowing exploit development. There are various categories there, like recon and cryptography and stuff that you might know, and web hacking, but there's always a lot of binary leakness. And this is the binary leakness. And the DEF CON capture the flag, which is where a lot of these are pointing towards, is nothing but binary leakness, where you observe raw binary code and design binary attacks. And so you need to know exploit development, and this class, in the same spirit as everything else, gives you just the beginning of exploit development. You learn how to do a few of the simplest things, and that gets you off the ground, but it goes up to the sky from there to where you get up to the real nation states making attacks and defending from them. And what we're mostly doing here is learning the simple attacks that really are like 10 years old. But you got to start somewhere. So that's where we are. Are there any questions about anything? All right. Well, let me just start with the first lecture here. So this is called Before You Begin, and what this is basically a summary of a little bit of assembly language, which your textbook author assumes you already know, and I do not assume you know, so that's why I'm covering it here, I think. But this is the amount of assembly language we're going to use in this class, which is not very much, but it helps to know a little. And if assembly language is very difficult, it's probably one of the most difficult topics the students complain to me the most about. It's like mathematics. If you don't get it, don't quit, because you don't need to understand a lot of it. The more you know, the better, but you can get by just like somebody who can't read can just look at the pictures. You can just look at the names of the functions and not understand the other assembly language code, and that can actually get you somewhere. Like you're reading a virus, you're looking at the code, you don't really know what load or move or anything is, you just look at the name of the function, print, scan, open internet URL. Well, I know what that's doing, that's opening internet URL. Just read what part you can understand, and you can get some good out of that. And as you gradually get used to it, more and more into the assembly, you'll become more powerful, but you got to start somewhere. So don't let the complexity of the task scare you away. This was very hard for me. I came from math and physics, and math and physics is completely perfected 100 years ago. So by the time they present it to me, you just learn this fact and learn that fact and learn that fact and make sure you got this one 100% before you go on to the next one, because it's all completely paved ground. It's been trodden over by 100 years of people before me. So it's absolutely true that everything in the book is right and everything you need to know. And if you do it in exactly this order, it will work. And there is nothing like that in this field. This field is open warfare. It's combat and chaos. Viruses are coming, defenses are coming, updates are flying all over the place. Half the tools you use don't work, and the bad guys are messing up the other half. So you can't have this attitude that I must understand 100% of page 1 before I go to page 2. You have to have a whole different attitude where I'm going to skim through it and get a vague idea what it's about, and then decide how much do I care, because stuff is just happening. Like people are coming up and shooting at you. You don't stop and spend a year psychoanalyzing one of them. You quickly figure out which one is the main danger and focus on that one. and you accept, I never will know what that other problem was. I don't care. This problem is more important right now. So that's kind of fun. After you get over this physics and mathematics concept that you should thoroughly understand things. So vulnerabilities are weaknesses in systems that give you a chance to do something you should not be able to do. So you can freeze a server so it's unavailable. You can escalate privileges from low privilege account up to administrator, or you can get a shell where you get the ability to send commands remotely over the internet and take remote control of the system. Those are all things that nobody wants you to do unless, of course, it is intended to be a remote control system like TeamViewer. But of course, what we're saying here is somebody intended for it to do something else, like send email or deliver a web page. And I found some way to trick it into letting me execute arbitrary code. And that's the goal of an exploit developer. So you find an exploit. Typically what you do is you find a crash. You somehow trigger an unexpected result on the server, an error message or a crash, often by just sending random packets until it crashes. And then exploit development is the process of improving that crash from just something that causes an error to something that gives you remote control or some other desirable outcome, but usually it's a shell you want. So that's what's called an exploit. You also call this developing a proof of concept. Like you say, I found a problem in the code. You report it to the company, they say, we don't care, that problem doesn't really matter. They won't believe you until you have a proof of concept. I can actually do something awful with this. This is true on pen tests. When we were in the collegiate pen testing championship, they said, you have to show us that it will really affect our business. So don't tell me there's a cross-site scripting on our web page and it means somebody can access some database of search files that are public anyway. We don't care. You're a voting company. You have to show us you can actually change the votes or something. Then we would care. And that's the way it is. It has to actually affect something that matters. So that's exploit development. So a 0-day is an exploit that has not been publicized anywhere. So people do not know how it works and do not know how to defend against it. And they're not expecting it. So their antivirus won't see it. Their intrusion detection system won't see it. And there is no update they can download and put on to block it. Those things are very valuable. China has a ton of them. Big hacking groups have a ton of them. It's mainly the province of nation states and the most advanced attackers. But everything is a 0-day until it is published. After it's published, you can start counting the days since it was published. Like we just had Meltdown Inspector that was supposed to be announced on the 10th of January of this year, but it leaked on about the 3rd of January. And everybody was scrambling. For about a week, the patches that were supposed to be out were not out. Then the 10th passed, and we found out that all the patches that were the official patches that were coming out were pretty much useless anyway. It didn't work. So now we're all swimming through the slog of many, many problems with these patches and attacks, and the updates causing more trouble than they fix. But that's the game. It's not a 0-day anymore. Now it's been out for a while. So fuzzers are programs that just send a lot of random data to a server in the hopes of making it crash. And basically, almost all the exploits we're going through here, if not all of them, are memory corruption exploits. You feed in data to some kind of server, and that data goes into memory, and you find a way to have it do the wrong thing in memory. And then that's how you take over the machine. So you have to understand how memory is used normally by computers to understand how to abuse a memory error to take over the machine. One crazy thing about computers is they don't know what you're storing. Pictures, text, programs, images all look exactly the same, just a bunch of bits, 8 bits per byte. That's why there's a kind of a fun, there's a fun thing you can type into Notepad that is readable, and when you save it and run it as an exe program, it prints out an insult for George Bush or something. Because a series of bytes could be a program or image or written text, and there's no real difference. So this is actually very useful to us. You can take something that's supposed to be text, like a password, and you can put executable instructions in there, and then trick the program into jumping into it and running it, and that's usually how you take it over. So this is a misunderstanding of the computer, where input that was supposed to be text is then reinterpreted as executable code. There are various defenses to prevent this, but that's basically the fundamental trick you do here. So when you launch a program, say you double-click an icon and launch something like Microsoft Word, then it creates an address space. It's a virtual address space. Every Windows program thinks it's running at the same address, 400,000 in hex. I don't know why, but they do it that way. And they have a base memory stored by the operating system, and they all think they're using addresses that start at 400,000, but they have a certain area of memory allocated to that process, and that's all they can see. So there are three kinds of segments. Windows programs are portable executable files, and they can have many segments, but there are three they almost always have: text, data, and VSS. Text, even though it sounds like written text, it refers to the executable instructions, which is one of the general rules for computer nomenclature is everything is usually named the opposite of what it is. It helps you remember. Anyway, so text contains your executable instruction. The data contains static variables that are writable, and the VSS is the stack frame, which again is a place where you temporarily store things, put them on there and take them off, again, writable. When I began programming assembly language on 8-bit processors in the 1970s, I wrote a lot of self-modifying code because there were only 160 instructions available in the processor, and the ones I wanted often didn't exist. So I would make an absolute move instruction, and then I would write into the address space of the instruction and modify it while it ran because I didn't know any better. Now that is considered a horrible thing to do because you can't even write down the code and read it and understand it. It changes while it runs. And this is what viruses do, is modify their own, so they actually don't allow that anymore. It was, that's why the text section is typically read-only. You are not allowed to modify the code while it's running because that's insane. I used to do it all the time, but the modern processors are smarter than letting you do that. The stack is a last in, first out data structure. I remember learning this years ago and it seemed kind of strange. It's like the tray of trays at the cafeteria. The last one you put on is the first one that comes off. And the reason it does that is for calling subroutines. This is a special memory structure designed specifically for the task of having a main routine that calls a subroutine, that calls another subroutine and another subroutine. So you get many layers down into a dream within a dream, and then you can come back up. And this structure is designed for that purpose. The heap is where you put other things, just lumps of data that you don't need to store permanently, but you might use for a while. Like you might have network connection and people are uploading images or something. So some data is coming in from the network card and you have to put it someplace while you process it, and then you're done with it. So you put it on the heap. So when you store something on the heap, first you allocate some room, then you put some data, then when you're done, you free it. So it's available for, again, for later. This is how you make a program that doesn't occupy more memory than it has to, by storing all kinds of old data that you're done processing. The heap can also grow, and the heap has a doubly linked list of objects of different sizes. This one goes to this one, this one, this one, just random objects stuck together. And you can exploit the stack and the heap if you ever get a chance to put in data that is bigger than the allocated space and overrun the space. That's the most common kind of attack. So here's an example of a program layout. Every computer has kernel mode. All the programs you run and launch from the desktop are in user mode. As the user, you are not authorized to touch the hardware. If you want to send a 5-volt signal to the printer, you cannot do it. You are like an executive who is not authorized to handle the factory machinery. You have to ask the kernel to please do that for you. And the kernel you're not allowed to touch very much, pretty much is the way Microsoft wrote it. So the kernel's running here to handle the hardware. And if you want to do something to hardware, like send something out the network card, you ask a kernel routine, please send this out the network card for me. And it does it for you. And if you don't like the way it's doing, tough. Now in earlier versions of Windows, like Windows 2000, there were raw sockets. And in Linux, there's raw sockets. So you can actually send something directly out the network card, but ever since Vista, Microsoft does not allow that anymore. You are not allowed to send anything out the network card on your own. All you can do is ask our API to use our Microsoft routines to do it. If you don't like that, go buy a Linux machine instead. Anyway, you have the kernel space, which you can't really directly use much at all. Then you have a stack growing down, the memory map segment, the heap growing up. And then you have a data segment, a text segment down here. And all right, the text segment down here contains assembly language instructions that are moving bits around, and they're writing it to the heap or to the stack or to other places, and then they're loading it in the stack typically, and then calling functions up here in the kernel that do things. So I say, I want you to send something out the network card. So on the stack, I'm going to put the port number and the identity number of the card and a string of text I want you to put out there on the stack. And then I'm going to call the routine here, which will fetch that stuff off the stack and send it out the network card, and it will return in a register, EAX, back to my program an error code telling me whether it worked or not. And then my program will decide if it worked, then go on to something else. If it failed, then print out an error message and tell the user that something's wrong. That's how it all works in general terms. So I got some Kahoots. If you have a computer or a cell phone, you can play the Kahoots. They're worth extra credit too. So I'll bring it up here and we'll see. There we are. This is the first set of Kahoots. And you need the glorious Kahoot music. Ah, there it is. Okay. So things are good. All right. So get a computer or a cell phone if you have one, and go to kahoot.it and put in that number. These things are worth 3 points if you get the most right, just like my other classes. And the only purpose of them is to recharge the number of people that are falling asleep. I used to use these iClicker things for hardware, but the Kahoot is more fun, and especially for remote users that are coming in by Zoom. This works much better, so I switched to it. You are rated on both the accuracy and the speed of your answer. There they come, good. One thing I think is funny is I can kick you out for having an offensive name. I've never had that problem, but I think they use this in like K through 12, and there people are all excited that people shouldn't see a dirty word. If you don't want to see a dirty word, you shouldn't be in computer security. Computer viruses and for that matter hacking tools are written by criminals, and they are not polite people. In fact, a lot of them really like to shock people, sort of like our president. So they try real hard to say things that they shouldn't say, because they get a kick out of you being upset. So you can't take a tender attitude. I remember first in this class I ever taught, I needed a rootkit to put on Linux, and the only rootkit I could find was named Fuck It. And I said, well, it's a good thing my students are adults. I was teaching high school. I wouldn't be able to teach them about rootkits, but you know, it was a pretty visible rootkit. It was the only Linux rootkit I could find at that time. All right. Number 27. This will wait a few more seconds to see if more people are coming. And then Anonymous came with their dumps and everything. Holy crap, you can't be tender. Just lots and lots of really offensive things happening at many levels, so you can't be squeamish. All right, I'll give it another 10 seconds and then we'll start. What's that?
We're all waiting for the PP tape.
Oh yeah, that's right. The PP tape is supposedly coming. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. So an attack with no known defense. What's that?
0 days. 0 days.
Well, am I getting a point? I put in the box. All right, okay. So that is, of course, a 0 day. Good. All right. Anna's ahead. So the process of sending random data to the target. Might have been. All right, good. That's buzzing. Good. Glad to see it. All right. What part is LIFO? All right, second the stack. Last in, first out. All right, Brandon's ahead. All right, where are the machine language instructions? That's the text section. And what section is read only? can't change anything. The speed. Okay, so that's the text section also. Remember I said self-modifying code is no longer considered code. So here are the glorious winners. I'm going to record them here, which is going to be K. I'll have to tell me who they are, but I know the other two. Okay, good. Okay, good. Brandon G. Anna. Okay, I'm going to save that just so I remember to give you guys your points on my desktop. There's Kahoot.
Don't need extra points for first?
You do. 3 points for each one you win. So it can add up. All right. So let's go back to here. I see we haven't been here an hour yet, so we can carry on a bit. All right. So a little bit of assembly language. A very little bit. If you actually know assembly, you will laugh at this. But in case you don't know any, you will now know a little more than 0. That's what we're going here. So there is a different assembly language for each kind of processor. There's a different hardware binary language for each type of processor. That's built into the silicon. And as we have discovered early this year, all Intel processors, and in fact all processors of all types, even ARM processors, have a hardware defect that cannot be patched, and that leads to the Spectre and meltdown vulnerabilities. So once you have put a basic language in the processor, you can't change it except by ripping out the processor and replacing it. You're stuck with it. Now that is the machine language, which is just a series of binary bits. The assembly language is an attempt to make machine language readable. And it is a little more readable. Not as readable as languages like C and Python, but a little more readable. So x86 is the most common language for malware and for attacks because Windows is very, very fond of backward compatibility. Windows is designed for businesses to make money. They are not interested in some kind of intellectual or mathematical purity. They want to make machines that are useful on the job. Very many companies have legacy code. Their cache registers run on something ridiculous like MS-DOS or Windows 3.1, and they're working fine. So when they upgrade to Windows 10, they want some way to run their old software written for something 20 years ago. And they're not kidding. It's working fine, and it would cost a lot of money to upgrade. So Microsoft always is very, very accommodating at running old code. So if you have 32-bit code, it runs fine on a 64-bit system. This is not true of Linux. Kali is very cruel. If you try to run a 32-bit program on a 64-bit version of Kali, it will tell you file permission error. You'll think you need sudo or something. It's lying. It can't run it because it's 32-bit code. The error message is very unhelpful. But Windows can. You can run one version back. So a 64-bit machine can run 32-bit code, and a 32-bit machine can run 16-bit code if you have any of that around. So if you write 32-bit attacks, they'll work on both 32 and 64-bit machines. So why would you bother writing 64-bit attacks? They won't work on the old 32-bit machines. You're just working too hard for no real benefit. So almost all malware and attacks are 32 bits. There are a few 64-bit attacks and a few 64-bit viruses, but they are rare because most people find it more convenient to just keep writing 32-bit stuff. Yeah?
There's questions like VMware, it's bigger battles and goes directly instead on top of OS.
Yes.
So will the attack be about the same or could be even more detrimental because it access directly to the stack and it just falls through?
Well, there are a few things that come to mind based on your question about virtual machines. One is the simplest case is where you attack a virtual machine like it was a real machine. You compromise the virtual operating system by corrupting the virtual memory. And that's fine, but you could also escape from the VM and attack the host system. Yeah, and that's what happens with Spectre and Meltdown. That's why they're really freaking out, because Spectre and Meltdown let you escape into the host memory or even into the memory of another virtual machine on the same host. And those are considered a whole new level of danger for cloud providers where everything is virtual. So, and those were considered fairly rare and exotic until a couple weeks ago when this gigantic category of vulnerability came out that affects almost everything. And there are, Spectre in particular, does let you escape VM and affect other pieces of memory. So people are scrambling to patch it. And all the virtualization providers have software patches that hopefully protect you to some extent. Although everybody says there's no real defense except replacing the processor, And not only is that impractical, it's also impossible because there's nothing you can buy that doesn't have this problem. It's going to take them 5 years to design something better and manufacture it. So tough. All you can do is patch the particular software exploits that are in use without really patching the underwear and hardware vulnerability and go that way. That's not pleasant, but that's all we can do. Yeah.
That is also true with the government systems?
Yes, every computer system. Yes.
Federal and state.
Oh, sure. Besides, government systems are the least secure of all. The military has been putting out standards for about 4 years of government security, and they audit the systems every year and put out a report, and every year they're like 95% out of compliance. None of the government systems are secured up to the level they should be, with the exception of one would like to hope, like the main NSA, high-value systems and stuff. But I think you can forget about that because now we know the NSA people are just taking it home and putting it on their home machines, Kaspersky, and getting stolen by the Russians and stuff. So nobody is very safe at all, even the people who should be. Yeah.
What vendors are the most responsible as far as disclosure and patches?
That's a very difficult question. I would say which question for the remote viewers is which vendor is most responsible. People argue like crazy. Google seems to have a lot of technical innovation, but they have this ruthless 90-day policy where they just dump something. And when they had a really dangerous exploit, and Microsoft asked them for like 2 more days, they said no and just dumped it. So you could call them irresponsible for that. Microsoft has the most mature software development security program and a very mature patch program and executive reports and everything, but they just changed all that and people say they ruined it. Apple is way behind on everything because they've been dwelling in the illusion of safety for a long time. They tried to pretend there was no problem until like just a couple of years ago. So they're scrambling to put in the defenses Microsoft has had in there for years, and they're still undergoing the culture shift of having to admit that there really are attacks and our customers are really getting hosed and you're going to have to install defense products and not really trust your computer, which they really don't like to admit. So it's very complicated. You know, a long time ago, people used to think generalizations would work, like Linux is more secure than Windows. Now I think we've grown up and realized there's no such thing. Everything has weaknesses. Everything can be made more secure. It's only as secure as the skill of the expert protecting it. If you set up Windows correctly, it's fine. If you set up Linux correctly, it's fine. If you're sloppy with either one of them, they're dead meat. You know, yeah.
We had a guy that worked for the Navy a couple of days ago, and he works in cybersecurity, and he was talking about this issue from Untitled Chapter.
Yeah.
And he was saying that the Navy, the military, they actually somehow have like a solution to fix it. Not really a solution,
Well,
but
that's a good point. The military, one would hope, would have some kind of solution for the really important stuff, which might involve adding more chips to the board. Or maybe they have some other special processor. I know when Obama became president, they took away his BlackBerry and they gave him a military BlackBerry, which was their version, supposedly more secure. So they may have something. That's a good point. But I think there's nothing generally for sale that's immune right now.
So you can attack these two threats by changing microcodes somehow?
That's what they're doing. They're patching things like microcode and kernel drivers and browser and all that stuff. They're patching what software they can to make it so you can't get at the vulnerable chip, which is all you can do. It's like you put antivirus on instead of patching the vulnerable service, and the antivirus hopefully catches the attack before it reaches the vulnerable service. It could work. It's not perfect, but it can work. These are all good points. All right, so instructions look like this, machine learning instructions. You have a mnemonic like move, and then you have some parameters. Now some commands have no parameters, like return. It's just RET, that's it. Returns from a subroutine, you don't need any numbers. But most of the time, you need parameters. So this will move the immediate number 42 in hexadecimal into the ECX register. Unfortunately, there are two syntaxes, just to give you a headache. One of them, this is, I think, AT&T, Intel, or Anley. But what I do is I look for an immediate value. You can move 42 into the ECX register. You cannot move the ECX register into 42. 42 is just a number. So that's how you tell. I always look at the code and find an immediate value. That is the source. The other one is the destination. One syntax has move destination source like this. The other one has move source destination. So you just get a headache. Anyway, so This will move, there are registers. Registers are little memory storage on the microprocessor itself. They're very fast, and you use them as a temporary place to put things before you decide what to put in RAM, which is much slower and much bigger. So this will put 42 into the extended C register. The registers had this name because back in the days of 8-bit processors, there was one register called A, for the accumulator, and that got its name from mechanical adding machines before there were electronic computers. And then when they went to 16-bit processors, they called it AX and BX, and then when they went to 32-bit processors, they called it EAX for extended A extended. And 64 uses RAX. But anyway, that's why it's got this crazy name. So, all right, so this instruction is actually kind of instruction you will avoid in shellcode. We'll talk more about it later. But in order to do this process, it takes 5 bytes of machine language because the immediate value 42 is a 32-bit value. It's a 32-bit processor. It expects to move 32 bits of data all the time. So it doesn't just store 8 bits of 42. It has 3 more bytes of 0 on the right of it. So this instruction is B9, which is the operation, and then 42, 0, 0, 0. You got too many zeros there. I'm going to fix that because it's irritating me.
You said 4-bit bytes? Or?
Yes, 4 bytes, because of 34.
So,
yeah, that because it is 64 bits, you're right. That is because that's the default size of a, wait, no, that's 32 bits. Each one of these is 4 bits, each nibble.
oh, heck, yeah.
So this is a byte, 2 zeros, there's another byte, that's 16 bits. And here's 2 and 2 more. This is 32 bits. 32 bits is the address space of a 32-bit processor, which is the main reason people moved away from them, because they can only address a maximum of 4 gigabytes of RAM. And as we know, 4 gigabytes is not a lot of RAM. It might very well want more, and you really pretty much need a 64-bit processor to get the full value of it. So now there's Endianness. If you're not already upset about the fact that the order of the operands varies, the significance of the digits varies, just to give you a headache. So big endian puts the most significant byte first. This is the way you write normal base 10 numbers. So 42 would be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 42. But Intel is little endian, so it does it the other way. This is the least significant bit, next, 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 and next. Don't ask me why. However, network addresses, like 147, 144, 1312, are big endian. So you very frequently have to reverse things from big endian to little endian. And this is another reason you get a headache. I must confess, when I look at assembly language, I just sort of remember that I don't know which way anything goes and try to skip over it. Yeah. No, that's even more cruel. It's not, it doesn't reverse all the bytes. It only reverses the order of bytes, not the order of bits within a byte. Big endian is sensible. Little endian is actually not very logical at all. You have a descending list of 8 bits, and then the next higher descending list of 8 bits. So it is very messed up mathematically. And when you start doing exploits, you put text in, and your text typically fills in the wrong way. You're putting A, B, C, D, we'll put A, B, C, D, and then go to the next E, F, G, H. So you get used to the screwy order things are in. Things do not go in order in memory like you think they should.
You know, like in TCP dump, when you see the dump, isn't it kind of like backwards to read the
parts of it look kind of backwards. Yeah, if you look at the bottom wire chart, it's a good place to go. Yeah, that's right. All right, so here's an IP address, 127.0.0.1. That's 7F001. So you send it over the network in that order, because remember, if you remember your old Net Plus, you want to know what class it's in, and if the first bit is 1, it's class, if the first bit is 0, it's class A, and if the second bit is 0, it's class B. So you really want the high order bits to go first. It matters. It makes the routers faster. So it sends it that way. But when you store it in RAM, it's stored backwards. So there are commands to flip it back and forth. All right, then there's operands. You can have immediate values that are just numbers, like 1 or 2 or hexadecimal 42. Then you have registers. There's only so many in your processor. There's A, B, C, D, and the extended instruction pointer, and so on. And then there's memory addresses. You put brackets, square brackets around something, and now whatever you put in there, that's an address. So this is not EAX. This is the location pointed to by the current contents of EAX. That's called indirect addressing. So here's the registers. EAX, B, C, D, EBP, ESP, and EIP. These are the common ones you use. A, B, C, and D are general purpose registers. They can be used for all different purposes. However, EAX is commonly used for the return value from a subroutine, and there's a few other that have fairly common traditional uses, but they could be used for anything. This is the stack. The current stacked frame, the top of the stack is ESP, and the bottom of the stack is EBP. We'll be using those a lot. Now, the other one we'll use a lot, of course, is the EIP. The EIP is the instruction pointer. That is the address of the current instruction that is being executed. Our primary goal in taking over machines is to control EIP. If you can control EIP, it's a huge step forward at taking over the machine, because now you can force it to execute a command of your choice instead of whatever command the developer expected it to execute. All right, so that's just tells you the same thing. There's some segment registers keeping track of segments of memory and status flags. I didn't worry about them. The main thing we care about is ESP, EBP, and EIP, and you get used to using EA, EBX, ECX, and EDX. All right. The registers are all 32 bits in X32 machine code, which is all we're talking about here. You can also register them as pieces. AL is the lowest 8 bits, and the H is the highest 8 bits, and you can reference them 16 bits at a time, but this is quite rare. It's just something people might do occasionally in shellcode to avoid having null bytes in commands. Other than that, it's only there for like backward compatibility with 8-bit code, which is kind of nuts, and there's not much of a real issue of that anymore. So here's how it looks. EAX is this 16 bits. Here's AX is the lower 16 bits, and that splits into A high and A low if you really want to reference 8 bits at a time, which is kind of nuts, but occasionally useful in shellcode. So general registers contain values, things you're doing math on, and addresses of things you're referring to all the time. And I say they have various purposes, but most of the time they can be used for anything. EAX typically contains the return value after you call something. So if you call something like printf and it tries to print something, EAX will have 0 if it worked or 1 if it failed. That's the general convention in C programs. So eFlags is a status register with a bunch of flags. Every time a instruction takes place, it records a bunch of facts about the instruction. Like, was the last result even or odd? Was the last result 0 or not, or so on. So then after each instruction, you can follow by a jump 0 or a jump not 0 based on whatever you just did, whether it resulted in a 0 or not. And that's technically done with these flag registers. You don't usually have to look at them directly. You can just learn how to interpret the meaning. So there's a 0 flag that tells you if the last bit was 0, a carry flag, a sign flag, and a trap flag. The trap flag is what debuggers use. You don't really need to know that, but that's what they use to stop processing so you can freeze a program partway through and analyze. And we'll be doing a lot of that. And it is using the trap flag, but you don't really have to worry about that. The program does it for you. EIP, like I say, is our #1 target. That's the address of the next instruction to execute. If we can control this, then we pretty much can easily take over the machine. The only missing part after this is to find an instruction that does something I want to do and point to that. And that sometimes is harder than you might think because there's things like address space layout randomization making it hard to figure out where things are. But controlling EIP is a giant step forward at taking over the machine. If you just put random junk in EIP, the machine will crash. It will jump to some memory location that is either invalid or contains stuff that was not intended to be instructions, so it'll do a couple of random things and then crash as it hits an illegal instruction. This is why fuzzing works. You fuzz things. If there's a vulnerability, you corrupt memory. Some of that memory gets in the EIP, then it goes somewhere crazy and crashes. That's why if you're able to send random data and make the machine crash, then there are various reasons it might have crashed. And if you were able to crash it by altering EIP, then you're really moving ahead. That means some of the data you put in actually changed the instruction pointer. If it crashed for some really boring reason, like you just filled up all available memory and hit the limit, then that's not usually exploitable. Yeah.
If you want to allow like fuzz the machine or a process that you don't want to take down.
Okay, normally fuzzing is the way I describe it, where you are going to crash the machine. If you want to avoid taking it down, there is another kind of fuzzing where you actually work with the source code and you put in like traps inside the source code and recompile it, and then you control it, test this and test that. But usually any kind of fuzz testing does involve a chance of killing the server.
What's
During
that?
my high school coffee.
What's
So
that?
are you gonna continue?
Yeah,
No.
I'll send them
So
up
I'm
to
gonna use
you.
up to-
Yeah, I'll send them up to you. Yeah, yeah. I forget the name. It's, you know, it's certainly considered the most valuable kind, but you can only do it if you're really the software developer. You can't do it to other people's problems. Yeah, it's an intelligent kind of fuzzing. So I got some cahoots. These are very good questions. And let's see, good, just about on the hour. So we can take a break after this. I think we can stay right on track. All right, so here's my cahoots. Great, okay. And this is 1B. We'll do it. There. Yeah, okay. All right. Where's the magic number? I guess I should hand around a list of names, so if they decide to tell me there aren't enough students or something, I can wave some piece of paper at them. I have no idea what's going on around here, but why don't you just put the name on there so I can tell them how many students show up the first day in case that happens. Dealing with the administration here is sort of like having an alcoholic parent. You just don't know what they're going to do, and you try to guess what might actually not set them off today or something.
Or an unstable president.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Ring. Oh. Salacious.
Well, our president is very stable.
Dirty name up there.
He said so. He's also like really smart. All right, we're up to 28. I'll wait a few more seconds and see if we got any more. Aha! There they come. Okay, I've got to wait a few more seconds. Oh, someone used a bad word. Indeed. All right. Well, let's do it. Get out of the way as much as possible. Okay. What kind of assembly language is malware? Typically x86, of course, although an increasing number has x64 these days. All right, so what kind of notation erase loop back like that?
Hey Sam, you want to do ideas?
No, you don't do. What do you enable do? All right, that's big Indian, I thought. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I have any way to regrade these.
Yeah, I dropped the 7th place.
Yeah, well, that's highly rude. Well, whoever wrote these things should lose a point. Well, carry on. I don't know how to fix that. But big Indian is the right answer. Well, on we go. It's a good thing this isn't an official class or anything. All right. Move and the next one. Is that right? That's big Indian. Sorry about that. That's what you want. Good. All right. The operand is the other one. The thing you operate on. The mnemonic is the verb, you might call it, the part that tells it what to do. All right. So you put data in EAX. What kind of operand is EAX? Okay, that's a register. Good. All right. How about if you put brackets around it? Now what is it? That's a memory refresh. So now we've got a winner with a defective scoring system. It's sort of like winning the election without winning the popular vote. But that's the way it is. I'm unable to change it. So we got WJ Sec, I know who that is. And brain fuck. And
That's me.
that's you. Okay, good, okay. Good. All right. And we've got K, which is ×2. All right. You know, is K in the room?
Oh, yeah.
Good, okay, right, I remember. Good, okay, good. Carla, right?
Yeah.
Good, okay. All right, good. So I recorded this all important stuff. All right, well, you've been here for an hour, and I got a little more of this to do. I think we might as well go ahead. So let's take a break for 10 minutes and pick up at 2:15. And if I got no ad codes, I'm going to stop the Zoom and make it in 2 sections. So I'll be back in 10 minutes at 2:15. Let me end this here. There. Let's see, I had 6